Hello everyone and welcome. Let me start with a question. Have you ever finished reading a textbook chapter and then realized you couldn't clearly explain what you had just read? Maybe you've had this experience. You spent an hour reading, you highlighted important ideas, you underlined vocabulary words, you honestly try to concentrate. When you finish, you feel productive because you've spent a lot of time studying. Then someone asks you a simple question about the chapter. Suddenly, what seemed clear while you were reading doesn't seem so clear anymore. If that has happened to you, you're not alone. Many college students spend hours reading textbooks but remember surprisingly little afterwards. The good news is that the problem usually isn't intelligence, it's strategy. In this lesson, I'm going to introduce you to one of the most effective reading strategies ever developed for learning from textbooks. It's called SQ3R. By the end of this lesson, you'll know exactly what to do before you begin reading and while you're reading so that your study time becomes much more productive. So let's begin. This is John. John is a first-year college student studying for an anatomy exam. His professor assigned a chapter called How the Heart Pumps Blood. So John sits down to study. As he reads the chapter carefully, he highlights important ideas and writes a few notes in the margins. When he finishes, he feels confident because he worked hard. Surely he must know the material. But the next day, something unexpected happened. One of John's classmates asked him, "Can you explain how blood moves through the heart?" John smiles. He literally studied that chapter last night. This should be easy for him. But as he starts answering, he gets stuck. He remembers reading the chapter. He remembers seeing the diagrams, but he can't put everything together into one clear explanation. At that moment, John realizes something important. Reading information isn't always the same as learning it. Fortunately, there's a better way. The strategy John is about to learn is called SQ3R. It was developed specifically to help students learn more effectively from textbooks. Each letter represents one step. First, you survey the chapter, then you create questions. Next, you read with purpose. After reading, you recall what you've learned from memory. And finally, you review the material to strengthen your understanding and remember it longer. So let's begin with survey. One of the biggest mistakes students make is opening a textbook and immediately reading the first paragraph. SQ3R recommends something different. Before reading, spend a few minutes surveying the chapter. Think about assembling a puzzle. Most people look at the picture on the box before they start. Why do they do that? Well, because the picture shows how all the pieces fit together. Surveying does the same thing. It gives your brain a picture of the chapter before you begin reading the details. Let's see how John does it. Before reading, John grabs a blank sheet of paper. At the top, he writes the chapter title, How the Heart Pumps Blood. Now he knows the topic. Next, he reads the introduction to understand the chapter's purpose. Then he scans the major headings. He notices sections called the chambers of the heart, heart valves, pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation. Immediately, he can see how the chapter is organized. Next, he studies the diagrams and charts. He isn't trying to memorize them, not yet. Instead, he asks, "What is this visual trying to teach me?" Then he notices the bold vocabulary words because those usually identify the chapter's more important concepts. Finally, he reads the chapter summary. In just a few minutes, John has built a mental roadmap of the chapter before reading it in detail. Notice what the survey accomplished. John doesn't know all the details yet, but he already knows the chapter's structure. He knows the major topics, and he has a general idea of where the chapter is going. That simple preview makes new information much easier to organize because his brain already has a framework. Instead of entering the chapter blindly, John now has a roadmap and he's ready for the next step. Many students begin reading without knowing exactly what they're looking for. As a result, everything seems equally important. SQ3R changes that. Before reading, John turns each heading into a question. For example, beside the heading, "The Chamber of the Hearts," he writes, "What are the chambers of the heart?" Next to the heading "Pulmonary Circulation," he writes, "How does pulmonary circulation work?" He repeats this process for every major heading. Now, something important has changed. Instead of reading a chapter full of information, John is searching for answers. Those questions give his reading a clear purpose and help him focus on what matters most. Now that John has written his questions, he's finally ready to begin reading. Notice how different he feels from the way he studied before. Instead of wondering what information might be important, he already knows what he's looking for. Every paragraph has a purpose. Every section is an opportunity to answer one of those questions. Those questions naturally guide his attention toward the information that matters most. Instead of passively reading words on a page, John is now actively searching for answers. That simple shift improves both concentration and comprehension. Now, John begins reading. As he reaches the first section, he keeps his questions nearby. Every time he finds an answer, he checks it off his list. Instead of trying to memorize everything, he focuses on understanding the ideas that answer his questions. Notice that John isn't rushing through the chapter. His goal isn't to finish reading. His goal is to understand what he's reading. That's a very different mindset. John also changes another study habit. Instead of reading the entire chapter in one sitting, he divides it into smaller sections, maybe 3 pages, maybe 4. But after finishing one section, he stops before moving on. You will ask yourself, why does he do that? Well, he does it because learning takes time. By reading smaller sections, he gives his brain an opportunity to process new information before adding even more. It also prepares him for the next step of the SQ3R, which happens after every section, not after the entire chapter. As John reads, he keeps a pencil nearby. Whenever he finds an answer to one of his questions, he marks it. He underlines key ideas, he circles unfamiliar vocabulary, he writes short notes beside important paragraphs. Notice that John isn't highlighting everything. He's making decision. He's asking himself, does this answer one of my questions? Every time he answers that question, he's thinking more deeply about the material. That's what makes reading active instead of passive. By the time John finishes the first section, he feels good. His questions have been answered. The diagrams make sense. The vocabulary is becoming familiar. Everything seems clear, and honestly, this is where many students stop. They think, well, I understood it while I was reading, so I must know it. Well, John thinks exactly the same thing, but he's about to discover something that surprises many students. Imagine that someone closes John's textbook and immediately asks him, "Can you explain what you just learned?" Would he be able to do that? John thinks so. After all, everything made sense while he was reading, but there's an important difference between understanding information when it is right in front of you and remembering it after the book is closed. Reading helps us recognize information, but recognizing information is not the same as remembering it. When the textbook is open in front of you, the information feels familiar. During an exam, however, the textbook isn't there. Your professor isn't asking, does this information look familiar? Instead, they're asking, can you explain it? That's the difference between recognition and recall. Recognition happens while you are looking at the information. Recall, on the other side, happens after the information is gone. And recall is the skill that helps information stay in your memory. As soon as John finishes reading one section, he stops. He doesn't immediately continue reading. Instead, he closes the textbook. Then he asks himself one simple question: what can I remember without looking? That one question completely changes the learning process. Instead of depending on the textbook, John now depends on his memory. If he remembers the information, he strengthens it. If he forgets something, he discovers exactly what still needs work. Either way, he learns something valuable. The first rule of recall is simple. Close the book. Don't pick at the page. Don't look at your notes. Don't glance at the diagrams. If the answers remain in front of you, your brain doesn't have to retrieve them. And retrieval is exactly what strengthens your memory. That's why recall always begins with a closed textbook. There isn't just one way to practice recall. John uses several. First, he returns to the questions he created before reading. Without opening the book, he answers them from memory. Second, he imagines teaching the lesson to a classmate who missed class. If he can explain it clearly, he probably understands it. Third, he creates a quick outline using only the main idea he remembers. Finally, because anatomy includes many visual concepts, he sketches a simple diagram of the heart and labels its major parts. Although these methods look different, they all accomplish the same goal. They force John to retrieve information from memory instead of simply recognizing it. At first, recall can feel challenging, and that's perfectly normal. In fact, that's one of its greatest strengths. Recall quickly shows John what he truly understands and what still needs attention. If he forgets part of the process, he doesn't become discouraged. Instead, he knows exactly what to review. Rather than discovering those gaps during the exam, he discovers them while studying when he still has time to improve. After John finishes the entire chapter, he reaches the final step of the SQ3R, and that is review. Many students think reviewing means reading the chapter all over again. Effective review is much more focused. Its purpose is to strengthen learning, connect important ideas, and reinforce the concepts that matter most. Let's see how John does it. John begins with the chapter heading. He reads the first heading, The Chambers of the Heart. Then he covers the page and asks, what do I remember about this section? After explaining everything he remembers, he checks the textbooks to see whether he missed anything. Then he repeats the process with every major heading. This simple technique quickly shows him which sections he understands well and which ones need more attention. Next, John creates a concept map. In the center of the page, he writes the chapter title, How the Heart Pumps Blood. Around it, he adds the major idea, heart chambers, heart valves, pulmonary circulations, systemic circulations. Then he connects them. As he builds the map, he realizes something important. The chapter isn't really about 4 separate topics. It's one complete process. The concept map helps him to see how those ideas work together. John also simplifies his notes. Instead of reviewing long paragraphs, he creates short recall cues. For example, instead of writing an entire sentence about the right atrium, he writes, right atrium receives deoxygenated blood. Those few words are enough to trigger the complete explanation in his memory. Short recall cues make reviewing faster and much more efficient before quizzes and exams. Review also helps John identify weak areas. Maybe he remembers the heart chambers perfectly, but still struggles with pulmonary circulation. Now he knows exactly where to focus his attention. Finally, John reviews the material more than once. He spends a few minutes reviewing it the next day. Again, a few days later, and once more before the exam. These short review sessions strengthen his memory much more effectively than trying to relearn everything the night before the test. Students often confuse recall and review. Although they work together, they serve different purposes. Recall asks the question, what can I remember? While review asks the question, how do these ideas fit together and what still needs practice? As you see, recall checks for understanding, while review strengthens your understanding. Together, they help move information into long-term memory. Let's return to John. Before learning SQ3R, studying meant reading the chapter and hoping he would remember it later. Now, his routine is completely different. He prepares before reading. He reads with purpose. He checks his understanding after every section. Then, he reviews the chapters to strengthen what he learned. He is no longer depending on chance. He's following a process that helps him learn more effectively. A week later, John walks into class. His professor asks, "Can someone explain how blood moves through the heart?" This time, John raises his hand. He explains the process clearly and confidently, not because he has a perfect memory, not because he studied longer, but because he studied differently. SQ3R didn't simply help John finish a chapter, it helped him learn it. Now it's your turn. Next time you are assigned a textbook chapter, don't simply start reading the first page. Take a few minutes to survey the chapter. Turn the headings into questions. Read with the goal of finding answers. Pause after each section and practice recall. Then review the chapter by connecting ideas and strengthening the concepts that need more attention. The first few times you use SQ3R, it may feel slower than your usual approach, but with practice, the process becomes natural. More importantly, you'll spend less time rereading and more time actually remembering what you learn. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.